All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rose Melisani. I am the extension agent in Cascade County, Montana, which is based out of Great Falls. And tonight we have Sarah Eilers. Sarah actually runs the Montana Master Gardener program. There's several Master Gardener programs going on right now throughout Montana. However, if you want to do it online, Sarah is your lady to talk to. So we're gonna kick this off. We'll have Sarah do her presentation, and then you guys can type your questions in the chat, and I will prompt them when Sarah is ready. And I think what I'll do is I'll wait till the end, but you can hopefully unmute yourself as well. So if you want to ask your question directly, just go ahead and do that at the end of the presentation. Unmute yourself, ask the question. If you feel like you want to put it in the chat, I can see your chat. So go ahead and put it in there, and then I will ask Sarah at the end of the presentation. So Sarah is going to talk about seed planting success. The cool thing, yep, and Nicole, I am recording it right now. This time of year, I think everybody's just ready for springtime. The other day I was in my garden and my perennials are coming up, so I actually cleaned those out and just the ready for spring, seeing the new birds come and all of that stuff makes me super excited. So I hope everybody else is excited. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop my video and stop talking. So I give you guys Sarah.
Okay. Um, Good evening, everyone. Like Rose mentioned, my name is Sarah Eilers, and I help kind of manage the Master Gardener program here in Montana. And um, my background is I used to be a school teacher and then went a different direction and became an arborist and then started working for Extension back in 2016. So if you've ever called the Scudder Lab in the last couple of years, I was in the lab helping out in there too. So we'll go ahead and get started with this presentation, and let's see what I can share with you. So the first slide is really important. This map was just updated in the fall of 2023. It came out, I think, in November. And in the past, so we changed, our plant hardiness zones changed, and this little paragraph kind of goes over it. But it is based on the average annual extreme minimum winter temperatures displayed at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Zones ranging from zone 1, the coldest, to zone 13, which is the warmest. All plant hardiness zone maps should serve as a general guide for growing perennial plants. They are based on the average lowest temperatures, not the lowest ever. Zones in this edition of the USDA are based on the 1991 to 2022 weather data. When I posted this originally, I had people come back and say, well, these temperatures don't relate at all to the winter before last, and it doesn't. So it's from 1991 to 2020. And so if you go to this web page, you can put in your zip code and it'll tell you exactly what your zone is and what overall has happened. If you were a 4A before, you're now probably a 4B. But it's important to understand where you are in your temperatures. So that's one of the first steps when we're understanding what will grow where we live. The next slide, I know these aren't very exciting, but super important when it comes to picking out the plants you're going to use in your gardens. So frost-free data for Montana. Here at the bottom of the slide, I've got the web page where you can go to get all of it. And what I did was just clip a chunk because we're talking about roses out of Great Falls, so I use that. And this frost freeze is important because we need to know when we can plant our vegetable gardens without worrying about it freezing. So what we have here is right in here, we have 28 degrees, which is considered a hard freeze. then 32 is a freeze, and then 36 is a frost, okay? When we go over here in the spring, on May 11th, there's a 90% chance that you will get a frost, okay? And then on May 31st, there's only a 50% chance. And then on June 19th, there's only a 10% chance. So we have to know when we can plant these gardens, because some things like tomatoes, basil, they cannot handle frost or freezes. Then in the fall, we have 36 degrees. On August 31st, there's a 10% chance. On September 14th, it's a 50% chance. And on September 29th, it's a 90% chance. And then you go over here, and these are these freeze-free periods. So you're looking at how long your growing season is potentially, and you can look at them here and say, okay, 36 degrees, I might have 135 days. I have a 10% chance of having a 135-day growing season. I've got a 50% chance of 106. And for sure, I've got a 90% chance of having 76 frost-free days. So that's, and then there's a few other places in here just to see. My in-laws live in Hamilton, and they grow these beautiful apricots and cherries and all the things that will not grow here in Bozeman. But it's interesting to look at the different dates. Now, this material was from a while ago, and it probably does need updating because we are warmer, but at least you can use this to help you figure out what you can plant and when. So now we're on to the more fun slides. So seed selection. First, you need to make sure to purchase from a reliable company. And keep notes what you're finding about the different seeds, like germination, plant vigor, and pest susceptibility. So if you have a little notebook where you're keeping these seed packets, it might be really helpful. And then you can write down notes, because I always know I grab a few and I love some of them, but then I can't find those packets. So if you keep them, then you can keep track of the ones you like and or the ones you don't like. I had the privilege to go to a workshop last Saturday through the Gallatin Gardeners Club, and I know that's the Gallatin Valley, but they shared this source of seed, and these guys are top of their game, this garden club, and he shared this list of where they get their seeds. Cashman's Nursery is a local one here to Bozeman, but I'm sure you have some in Great Falls and in your local communities that are very reputable. A lot of people, Johnny's Select Seeds, Gurney's we've heard of, Territorial Seeds, but this list is some potential ones where you can get seed. And I shared my slideshow with Rose, so she could probably get you a notes page, so you don't have to write all this down. So anyways, I'm gonna keep moving here. So now we're gonna go to seed packet information. And right away, we look at this beautiful seed packet. It's a tomato, it's a beefsteak. We've all heard of that. And before we even get into going over what all the information is, it mentions heirloom here. And I wanted to visit with you about what makes an heirloom seeds. So most heirloom seeds have been saved and selected because they have the best flavor and production in home and small market gardens. They are open pollinated seed, and that means they can be harvested from the plant, saved, replanted at this, and the same variety will regrow year after year. The other part of what makes an heirloom is how long it's been around. So a lot of people mention the year 1951 because that's when the first hybrids became available. So anything before 1951 would be considered an heirloom. However, there are heirlooms that are 100, 150 years old. Native Americans were saving seed long before those times. So I just want to clarify what makes an heirloom. So now we're going to go over this slide. First, you're going to find a description. If it's not on this side of the packet, it'll be on the opposite side. But the seed packets usually provide a written description of the plant, including common and scientific name, and that's right at the top there. A picture of the plant and flower or harvested fruit or vegetable is generally found on the front of the seed packet. Plant height at maturity. So I don't see that on this side, but we'll look for it on the other side. Days to harvest or bloom. We've got frost sensitive 96 days from transplanting. Okay, so they're giving us some information. Uses and weight. Well, we know we've got 25 seeds here. Okay, and then the number or weight of the seeds is also found on the packet, which is helpful. Determining the number of packets you're going to need. So now we're going to go to the back side. We're going to find out more. Seed packet should state when to plant the seeds depending on which region of the United States they will be sown in. So if we look through this, when to sow outside for mild climates, which we are not, so we can just skip that one and go down to when to start inside. Recommended 4 to 6 weeks before transplanting, okay? Date, the year the seeds were packaged, and that's down here at the bottom, packed for 2024. Seeds, the longer you hold on to them, their viability decreases. So yes, you can use old seed, they just won't all germinate. And we'll talk about germination here in a second. And then days to emerge. Right here, we've got 5 to 10 days. And then planting depth or seed depth is 1/4 inch. Spacing, they're saying a group of 3 seeds every 24 to 36 inches. Row spacing, 36 inches. Thinning, when 2 inches tall, thin. And maturity, 90 days from transplanting. So I use tomatoes on purpose, you guys, because we can't plant, we could plant seeds outside, but when you look how long they need for maturity, and that's from when they're transplanted, they need way more than 96 days. They're going to need how many 4 to 6 weeks before that to get to the level they need to be before you plant them outside. So tomatoes, if you're not starting them inside yourself, you probably would need to buy a transplant to make them, or if you had a greenhouse or something like that, you could have that extended season. You need to know. So with this slide also, I was talking to someone just this morning and she said, yeah, I started my tomatoes inside and I started them way too early. And she was transplanting 3-foot high tomatoes and they were flopping all over the place. So you really have to do your math and know where things need to be and when. Rose, is there any questions right now?
No questions yet. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to put questions in the chat, go ahead.
Because I can't see them at all. So if you have any questions or anything like that. Okay, next slide. We're going to do lettuce. All right, we've got both names here. Frost tolerant, 21 to 45 days. Days to emerge, 5 to 14 days. Days to maturity, 21 to 45 days. We already know you guys have, even at the worst, 70 plus days. So lettuce is an easy one. And so that would be sown outside. And that is the recommendation also. All right. Corn. We've got 70 to 80 days And then we look over here, 5 to 10 days to emerge, and 70 to 80 days for maturity. So yeah, we could potentially grow corn. And I think this is interesting to look at the seed packet. When to sow outside, recommended 1 to 2 weeks after your average last frost date and when the soil temperature is at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit, ideally 65 to 90. So to get our soil temperatures that high would be a reach, but still, these would be planted outside once it warms up. And when to start inside, not recommended. This is one of those plants that really does not transplant well. So you need to seed corn outside. And it gives you the thinning, everything you need to know about it. So these seed packets are really important. That's why I'm saying if you could keep a little notebook where you keep them, and you could even write your notes where they have when the seed was sown, that would be optimal. So you could know for following years. Or let's say certain plants were super buggy. You can write that down too, so you know you want to try something different. Okay, pumpkins, sugar pie. My in-laws love these. These are a smaller pumpkin. And look at the maturity, 90 to 150 days, 15 days. So this one, we're going to be stretching to do pumpkins in some locations. So this one, though, it looks like we can start them inside. It's not recommended, but we are considered a very short growing season, 2 to 4 weeks before your average last frost date. So you could start them indoors. I think there's a question.
There is a question. Peggy asks, what about pinching back tomatoes and peppers started inside? When to do it, if at all, how far back?
So you want to go to a node where it's going to leaf out. Oh, I don't have a photo of this. I'm doing another talk that I'm talking about that though. So when you pinch the top, I'm just going to use basil because that's the easiest one. You pinch the top, you're pushing that energy into those laterals to make them more bushy. And I think you should make sure that you have enough leaf mass that you can pinch that and not compromise the dynamics that's happening, you know, the chlorophyll and all of that. So you don't want to pinch back too much. And it was tomatoes and what else? Peppers?
Peppers, yes.
Yeah, I think peppers peppers makes more sense to me than the tomatoes. But that one, if you want to send me a note, I will look it up for you and find out more. Okay, next one, planning. Choosing the right location. Sunlight, 6 to 8 hours is essential for growing healthy, productive vegetables. A flat area with easy access to water is critical. And along with this is at certain times of the day, if you have trees around your house, you might not realize how much shade they do shade that area. So make sure you're adjusting your garden location in relation to shade from other buildings and trees. Mapping and organizing. Plant tall vegetables like corn on the north or northeast side to reduce shading. Orient all rows in a north-south direction to take advantage of the best sunlight distribution. And correct spacing between plants. Correct spacing between plants is also important to ensure adequate nutrition for each plant and ease of harvest. Okay. So this is my in-laws garden. This is in the Bitterroot. He's very proud of his garden. This is more planning. This comes up a lot. You know, I showed you that frost freeze data and I showed you the zone map, but I bet you guys have friends who can grow things at their house that you might not be able to grow at your house. And that's due to microclimates. The climate of a very small or restricted area, especially when it differs from the climate of the surrounding area. If you have a very sheltered backyard, you might have a microclimate. My house is near 2 creeks, and 2 blocks away it'll freeze or frost, and it won't at my house. So we have several microclimates within blocks of each other in my area. So you have to realize, you have to research what you have in your environment. The next part of this planning is taking care of the soil. Not all soils are the same. Ideal soils are easy to work and have good mix of silt, sand, clay, nutrients, and organic matter. It sounds like, though, most of the time people don't have perfect soil. You get a lot of people who are like, it isn't perfect. What do I do? But I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to talk about what to do. Most Montana soils are alkaline and so well buffered that it's difficult to change their pH. So you hear about adding different things to the soil to make them less alkaline. But when you do the research, it would take yards and yards and yards of material to change your pH. One great thing you can use, though, is organic matter. But we all know about how great organic matter is. But the problem is we tend to too much of a good thing. We're putting organic matter every year into our gardens, and it's too much. So the thing to really start your garden is to get a soil test. And I'm almost positive that Rose can help you with that process. And she probably can help you read that soil test too to find out what needs to happen in your garden. Right. Next one. Is it better to direct seed or use transplants? That is the question. Okay, it's all to do with timing. Seeds and transplants should be planted at the right time and in the correct manner for the species and cultivar. This will vary with air temperature, soil temperature, and the needs of individual crops. So the benefits of direct seed. I saw the question come up. How do you know when there's too much organic matter? I think this is coming from when I worked in the lab. Sometimes they show signs that they look nutrient deficient. So the best thing to do would be to do a soil test. Just don't over compost every year unless you know for sure your soil needs that. So the benefits of direct seeding. Direct seeding is the sowing of seeds directly into the garden or field. It avoids disrupting the root system, avoids plants becoming root bound, more straightforward than indoor seed starting, right? Just traditional, go out and lay your seeds in the garden. Transplants, you get more mature plants and it lengthens the growing season, right? So you're not starting from a seed, you're starting from a plant that might be 6 inches tall. It's a couple weeks old or a couple months old. When you start transplants, you have control over the health of your seedlings. You can grow the exact number of plants you need, and transplants can outcompete weeds better than the small little directly seeded. Like if you look at the slide with the lettuce, there's no way that would compete with the weed. And with transplants, there's no thinning. So that's the beauty of transplants. It's just speeding things up. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is to plant too early. And I've seen it already, and I'm guessing you have too. There are plants in some of the big box stores already. We have a lot of new people to Montana. who don't realize how our spring is much different than a lot of other places. So temperature and soil temperatures are extremely important for germination and protecting your plants. So seeds of warm season crops such as tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers germinate fastest at 80 to 90 degrees. That's air temperature. Generally, vegetables germinate better at 60 to 80 degrees. After emergence, reduce the growth temperature to 60 degrees Fahrenheit at night, 70 to 75 during the day for most warm season crops. Cool season crops and tomatoes do well with that 68 degree Fahrenheit day temperatures and 40 to 50 at night temperatures. So we can go back to our freeze and frost and talk about soil temperatures, but in the wintertime, the soil is warmer than the air temperature, and in the summer, the soil is cooler and the air temperature is warmer. So it's finding that mix. When I was an arborist, people were like, come and fertilize, come and do this for our trees. And if it wasn't 40 degrees, we knew those root systems weren't going to take in the fertilizer. So it's just important to realize that temperature really does make a difference. And they're just, if you're putting seeds in the ground and it's cold, they're just going to sit. Okay, now we've got cool season plants and warm season plants. So you need to grow appropriate varieties and cultivars for the location. Cool season vegetable seeds germinate at a lower soil temperature, and young plants are frost tolerant and hardy. Cool season crops grow best with air temperatures between 55 and 65 degrees. Warm season crops make optimal growth between 65 degrees and 85 degrees. So I always think of peas, that you can plant peas really early, and spinach. They can handle the cold temperatures we have, but we would never think in early spring to plant cucumbers or tomatoes or peppers. Those are warm season plants. So this slide just kind of goes over the basics, and I'm going to give you some specific ones in relation to these so that you can look them up for yourself and see if that might work for you. Any questions? Okay, so I'm just going to read through those cool season. Beets, carrots, lettuce, parsnip, peas, potatoes, radishes, spinach, Swiss chard, turnips. Cool season transplants, cabbage family, celery, leek, and onions. Warm season direct seed, beans, cucumbers, squash, sweet corn. Remember, sweet corn doesn't transplant well. Warm season transplants, eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes. All of those require warmer temperatures and a pretty long growing season. And then fall planting is garlic. All right. So this is my list for you guys. When I went to this talk last weekend, the Gallatin Gardeners Club gave us a list of the plants they really like and how they seed them or transplant them. And this is just Don Mathry, who is listed here. He's a retired professor here on campus, very knowledgeable. And so they went through and gave us which was the spinach they liked the best, and usually I'm going to tell you the one that happens first is the one that pretty overall they liked the best. And here in the Gallatin Valley, they direct seed April 20th to May 1st. So you will need to adjust for where you are in Cascade County. But at least you kind of have a general date. And then here are some really nice choices that you can try. Yes. You guys will be able to get these slides. I shared this talk with Rose, so I bet she can do the slides. So you do not have to write all these names down because I've got a few of these. I sent him a note and asked if I could use their lists, and they were like, sure. So anyways, these are what these guys thought. What is the last frost date for this list? So well, it would depend on where you're at, right? So Gallatin Valley is going to be different than where you are. So you would have to look at that chart and find your frost dates. But these guys can handle some frost, right? These are those direct seeded, kind of cold hardy vegetables. So Megan, what I would do is go to the web page. We'll get those slides to you and you can look up your city and see those dates. Then you can know when you can plant. So transplanted, May 5th through the 15th, kale, cabbage, broccoli, sprouting broccoli, turnips, leeks, and shallots. So these are all transplants. You know that you grow them on inside in a greenhouse, wherever, or purchase them, but you transplant them between May 5th and the 15th. Direct seeded Memorial Day. This was a big discussion at this workshop I went to. And everybody was like, when should I plant my garden? When should I plant my garden? And here in the Gallatin Valley, it's Memorial Day. That's like, you're good to go. Memorial Day, though, I think is the 27th. I have it in here someplace. But anyways, this is a picture of buttercup squash, which would be considered a winter squash, right? And these direct seed cucumbers, bush beans, pole beans, pumpkins, and winter squash. This is not my father-in-law's favorite squash. He is a Hubbard guy, and he's like, I'm never planting these again. I'm only going to plant Hubbards. But if you don't know what a Hubbard looks like, they're giant. Like, to get half of one inside a normal sized oven is a feat. So you really need to love your Hubbard squash. You need to love squash to plant Hubbards. Okay, next one. Transplanted Memorial Day. So tomatoes. Here in Gallatin, they don't plant tomatoes until the Memorial Day. And these are my favorite. These are Sun Gold cherry tomatoes. And if you've never had them, they're wonderful. They're just a wonderful tomato. But there's two kinds of tomatoes that you can plant. We have indeterminate ones, which are tomatoes that keep growing and they're more vine-like and they set fruit through the whole season, okay? Then we have the determinate ones, which reach a mature height, set all their fruit at once and stop growing, okay? So here's the list of indeterminate ones: early Goliath, Estiva, early girl, taxi, and then the determinate are celebrity, bobcat. This has nothing to do with MSU. He made sure to point that out. Atlas, northern exposure. Then we have the cherry tomatoes, which I've had great luck with Sun Golds and Sweet 100s, but there's all kinds. There was a big discussion on which tomatoes make the best sauce. These long keepers are ones that you're seeing how long you can keep your tomatoes. And then they have eggplants and peppers here too. So Memorial Day, they were going to be transplanted. Let's see. So we know we only have these certain amount of days to work with our gardens. So we can start some things indoors, but we can try some other season extenders too, to kind of make up for our short growing season. So you can start plants indoors from seed, right? You potentially will need grow lights. Seedlings nurtured under grow lights are more vigorous. Sometimes a window is not enough. Seeding heat mats, that bottom heat really helps with germination and really puts on some girth. So bottom heat is important. Other ways you can start seeds and plants inside is with hydroponics. There's a few different systems now that are smaller that you can do that in there. Then you can have your own little greenhouse, individual cover over each plant to protect it. I'm sure some of you have seen the walls of water that when we put out, lots of people use them with tomatoes. That would kind of keep the heat in. This is a photo of row covers. Row covers are synthetic fabrics used to cover garden plants, usually vegetable and strawberry crops. These also, row covers can be used even throughout the season, and it can reduce some insects too. So there might be other reasons to use row covers. Then we have cold frames. Not per se a greenhouse. Lots of times you use old windows, put it on the south side of a building, and it's a protected place to start your plants where you can close it up at night and then open it back up in the day. And then high tunnels, just think of these row covers as high tunnels, but bigger. The one thing we really can do is choose varieties with the shorter maturation times. Least number of days to mature is another way to deal with our short growing season. Okay. Here's the next one. Oh, you guys might know all about pelleted seed, but I did not. And I think this is an awesome thing. I worked at a greenhouse when I was in high school, and I was supposed to be the one planting the seeds and all of that. And I got taken out of there right away and put to watering plants because I was not careful enough with the seed. But if they had pelleted seed, I would have done fine. But pelleted seeds were developed for commercial growers who use machines to sow the seeds. Pelleted seeds are simply normal plant seeds that have been coated to give them round, smooth, uniform shape and size, making it less likely for them to jam in a mechanical seeder and increasing the accuracy of the seeder in terms of spacing. Well, what does that matter to us? Well, it matters because these large seeds are easy to see and handle. So if you've ever got some of the seeds that are so minuscule that you can hardly know where they're at, this would solve the problem. I think they're usually, it's usually like a clay that they're covered with. So this is really cool. You can order these. I don't know that you can get them from a local nursery. You might have to go to some of the bigger seed companies. But the benefit is you can see them and handle them easier. They're less wasted seed. The seeds don't wash away, allows for correct spacing. So it eliminates that thinning altogether problem. That clay coating preserves moisture, works better with seeding tools. But the other thing that if you use pelleted seed, you have to, that growing, what you're growing them in has to stay moist, okay? And they have a shorter lifespan. You have to use all these seeds in that one season. You can't say, well, I'm going to use half of these this year and half the next year. Because of the process they've gone through, they will not germinate the same way they did the previous year. Okay. Any questions? All right. I'm going to keep going. So this one would be a great one to talk about pinching off, because in these basil you can see, I don't know if I can show you. So I guess you can see my cursor. Right here, if you were going to pinch that, you would pinch it here and you're going to redirect growth into these laterals. And because if you didn't, it's just going to become taller and taller and taller. And the question earlier is, when do you pinch? And I don't know exact dates, but I can find it. But that's what we were talking about. So transplants. Many warm season vegetables can't tolerate cold temperatures or mature in our short seasons. You need to start plants indoor or buy transplants from a local nursery or garden center. And I would highly recommend buying local. I've talked to a few different people who work in big box stores, and there's one that I talked to, and we are considered Pacific Northwest. So the plants are delivered to our stores like they would be if you were in Spokane or even in Seattle. We're kind of grouped into this, or even into Idaho. So just because the plants are there does not mean that those are the right plants for Montana. It happens with trees, it happens with perennials. You really have to do your homework before you buy plants and understand which varieties are going to do better. Cool season crops that require additional time to mature, such as broccoli and cabbage and Brussels sprouts, are also typically grown from transplants to allow them to make good growth during cool weather, ensuring a productive harvest. Okay, so this is the other reason. It's not just those plants like tomatoes that need a lot of heat. It's also these other ones who just have a longer growing season that we have to accommodate somehow. So transplants require light. Windowsills are usually not enough. And timing. Do not start them too early. Large plants can suffer from transplant shock. So you guys, transplant shock is, I'm going to give you a tree analogy again, because that's what's more familiar to me. But the bigger the tree you buy, the process of it growing in a pot or being balled and burlapped, the bigger it is, the more trauma its root system has faced. And so plants that get really big and really big root systems, when you have to pull it out of the pot and break up those roots, they're going to go through shock. And that's transplant shock. You'll see some wilting. I'm sure you've seen that if you've bought any plants before and put them in the ground. They don't always look too perky right away. So that's that. We're trying to avoid that transplant shock. So it might look fabulous to get some giant tomato plant to plant outdoors, but if it's root bound or it's been growing in these unreal environments, it's going to have that much harder of a time to adjust to your soils and your gardens. Okay. Doing okay. Okay. Next one. This question has come up a few times here in my office. People are calling saying, how long can I keep seeds? And there isn't a really good list. This one I found in Nebraska, but it's old. It's older, but you can see how long seed potentially will last. And this is seed that's been like perfect, dry, no other issues with it. So it looks like on average 3 years is how long a seed packet will last. And some of these, look at parsley, a year. But we've seen articles how they find seed from the pyramids and they'll grow those on. And yes, sometimes they do. But I just wanted to give you this so you knew, like, I'm going to buy all the sweet corn. Well, I'm only going to plant one of these packages. It's not like your sweet corn's going to last forever. And I think sweet corn is one of those ones that doesn't last very long. I just thought this would be helpful. All right. So we just talked about seed and how long it's viable. So you can do a germination test. If there's any master gardeners out there, we talk about doing a ragdoll test, but usually it consists of this rolled tube of moistened paper containing the seeds. You have wet paper towel, you put your seeds down, you put 10 seeds down, you put it on top of your fridge or somewhere warm, and then you go and check it every several days, and you're counting to see how many of those germinate, and you will get your percentage of actual germination. So this would be worth it if you had a whole bunch of old seed. You don't want to go and plant all that old seed and spend all that time and it not germinate. So this is what you would need to do. So there's a lot of different, you can go online and see these, but pretty much you're just, like I said, paper towel, moist paper towel, seeds, and you're checking to see how many of those seeds are germinating. So if you're only getting 5, it's half, right? So you're going to have to double the amount of seeds if you're going to lose half of them won't germinate. So I'll just leave that at that one for you. Next one, transplant, starting seeds indoors. It's fairly easy to buy supplies to start your own seeds indoors in your house, right? You can visit a nursery, garden supply store, see what startup products they have. While seed starts don't need light until they emerge, they might want some low heat on the bottom, those mats, that bottom heat to get those root systems going. Once they emerge, natural light in a sunny window location might be enough. It tends not to be, but grow lights or fluorescent lights will give starts the light they need. So once they've germinated, they're coming up, that bottom heat probably you can take out and just focus more on lights. Next one, starting seeds indoors. So 1 to 2 seeds into a pot or container, then to 1 seedling per pot or container. Peat pots, peat pellets, soil blocks, and paper pots may be planted directly in the garden. I'd be really careful with that. Make sure you have enough moisture. Some of those things don't break down super easy. Transplant into larger pots if necessary when there are 2 to 3 true leaves showing, and bottom water. If you're overhead watering, you can overwater and the potential for disease is higher. So bottom water is the way to go. Direct seeding. If you are going to direct seed, then read the back of the seed packet. For information you'll need to be successful, you're going to have the seed depth, days it takes for germination, spacing between the seeds, spacing between rows. If you need to thin the plants to a certain spacing, and here they're using a string to mark your rows, so it's so you can easily identify weeds versus germinating vegetable seeds. Okay, so those are kind of your options. Then this is super important. We're so excited when it's ready to plant these guys. They're ready to go and we just want to stick them out in the garden, but we need to slowly do this. And it's called hardening off of transplants. Before you put your transplants out in the garden, you may want to expose them to the outdoors to kind of toughen them up and get them ready for the harsher outdoor environment. You know, they've been like hanging out in your house or your greenhouse in this perfect environment, and then to put them out into our full, very hot sun, it can be crippling. Transplants grown in greenhouses or a basement need to be gradually acclimated to the dry air and intense Montana sun as their protective cuticle is thin. This acclimation is called hardening and needs to be done before setting them in the garden. And this might be something to do too if you buy transplants at a nursery, okay? Not just the ones you're growing yourself. This hardening off experience will encourage them to develop a cuticle that can withstand being outside and exposed when you plant them in the garden. So for the 2 weeks before you intend to plant outside, move them outside to a sunny location on the patio or someplace like that. I say sunny location, but I'd be very careful. I think kind of sun to shade, just being outside in shade at first, and then slowly, gradually getting them more and more sun would probably be optimal. Start off with a couple of hours a day and increase the time outdoors to full daytime over the course of 2 weeks. And be sure to bring them back in at night. And the story I have to say about this is one of the nurseries that I worked with, they had received a whole bunch of annual flowers from a nursery in Seattle and stuck them in their greenhouse when they got off the truck. The gentleman wanted his garden planted right away, so they loaded up all those plants, brought them to his property, and planted them. And the next day, they were just destroyed. And they brought the plants into the Scudder lab saying what happened to them, and they hadn't been hardened off. So coming from Seattle, like they should have stayed at the nursery and been hardened off outside for a little bit, not just one day in a greenhouse and then off. So make sure to harden off your transplants. Resources. This is a wonderful Mont guide, and I based a lot of these slides on the successful home gardening, vegetable gardening. You can find it here. The address is here at the bottom. Cheryl Morgaw, just a wonderful gardener, has a book out. She's just wonderful. So she helped write this. And then Ava Grima, who still works in the diagnostic lab, helped with it. Lori Krasinnik, she has moved on, but she was the insect diagnostician. Dara Palmer, who had my position before me. And then we have master gardeners who even worked on it. So this is a great Mont guide. Mont guides are free. So that could be a helpful one. The next one that I've heard raves about is, can I grow that here? Vegetable seed and transplant schedules for gardener container. Website is here at the bottom. Again, another Mont guide, super useful. And then one more. Ooh, this was a yummy one. This is from Wyoming. And I couldn't find the web page, but if you look this title up, it's beautiful and really educational and step by step. And I was raised in Wyoming, so I feel like if it can grow in Wyoming, it can grow in Montana. So this is another really useful resource for vegetable gardening. And I think Rose is sharing Mont guides with you guys. And then this is my contact information. So if you have Master Gardener questions or other questions, like I said, my background isn't per se 100% vegetable garden, but I can sure find you people who can help you. And I know Rose is super available to you. So that's what I have. So I'm ready for questions, if there are any.
There is one. Could you talk more about mulching? Do you mulch your vegetable garden? Do you leave the mulch there at the end of the season and work it into the soil each year? So there's a couple
Okay.
questions in that one. So I guess the first one would be about mulching your garden and do you do it?
I do. You need to be very careful with how you mulch a vegetable garden because it's different than a perennial bed. And a lot of times mulch, you don't want to work into your soil, right? Like if you use wood chips or bark around your perennial beds and trees, if you plant in that area, you pull all that mulch away, plant it, and then put it back. You don't want to put that into the soil. So I think mulching with compost is, if we're not overdoing, is a great thing. I know a lot of people use their grass clippings, and that is fine too. But you have to know everything you put on your grass, you're going to put into your vegetable garden. So if you have treated your lawn with a weed and feed, that weed and feed potentially is still on the grass and can leach into your vegetable garden. So you need to be very careful. And I know we have community gardens near our home, and there are some people who were doing their paths with wood chips and then went in with a rototiller. And you don't want to do that. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but.
Ooh, there's another question about broccoli and Let me get to it. Hold on one second. I want to make sure I ask it right. What do you think about growing broccoli and Brussels sprouts in Montana?
I think you can grow them. They're a longer season one. And I think if you did something, and I think insects can be an issue with them. And I think there is a Mont guide. There might be a Mont guide on growing those. So it would be worth going to the extension store and looking that up because I'm almost positive there's a Mont guide. Um, but you might need to do those extended season strategies to get the best crop.
Awesome. Are there any Master Gardener trainings in or near Glacier County, which would be the Cut Bank area, which would be Carrie Lewis?
Okay, so I'm not going up there this spring. I think we're going to be there in the fall. In April, we're going to be in Great Falls. Abby, who is the horticulturalist, and myself are both doing talks. And but I do think we're going to be up there in the fall doing Master Gardener training.
And I'll put Carrie's contact information in there for her. And also Sarah does have online Master Gardener classes, so even if your county or reservation doesn't have one going on currently, you can do that. I have several people in Cascade County who are doing the online right now. Megan has a question. She says, I have a seed starting question. I have an unheated greenhouse. Is it possible to start seeds in there? Would it be warm enough at night?
No, I don't think so. That's where if you put one of the covers over your seeds and then had bottom heat, but then you would need to have heat that once they germinated too. That would be, I just think we're not, you could, this, as I'm watching it snow out my window right now, it's just, our temperatures are so variable. It would be really sad to try to start something like that and then not have any success. So I would tend to say, even though you have your greenhouse, I would start them inside where they're protected. And that might be once they've grown up, you've transplanted them, you could move them out there to kind of harden them off because by then the temperatures will warm up. But you could also plan it, time it. If you're starting certain seeds in that greenhouse, it might be close enough to the time when you could plant. It's all about timing.
Nicole says that the Teton County agent, who is Jen Swanson, might be holding a Master Gardener program at Power Public Schools. So you can reach out to Teton. And then I provided Carrie's phone number for the Glacier County question. Uh, I laughed because you were talking about pumpkins, Sarah. And anyway, my mom loves to start seeds. And so one year she made a bet with her friend who could grow the biggest pumpkin. And she started her seeds inside in like February or something. So she totally cheated. I think she might have won, but I told the gal, I was like, I don't know if you guys have rules set up for this, but it's pretty interesting. And then when I was in high school, I did the horticulture class, and so we had a greenhouse and we hardened off all of our flowers. And Mother's Day was the day that we sold all of our flowers, but we took them outside and it was snow on them, and the petunias were like on the ground. And then you go to Great Falls and they'd be these big, beautiful, nice petunias on Mother's Day, but ours were extremely hardy. And all those ladies who bought our petunias, they were so mad, but I think they probably made them till November. Darcy Neal has a or question or comment. She says, I built a cold frame and put a remote thermometer in it. Inside the cold frame was only 3 degrees warmer than the outdoor temp. Well, that's something that you could do too. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So she just another strategy. I had a cold frame and we hauled it from Bozeman to Helena and back to Bozeman. And my husband finally said, "We are not moving this cold frame anymore." Just old rickety windows and it's falling apart. But I loved my cold frame. And what I used it for, and it might not have been totally appropriate, but I, I love to start everything in it, especially my tomatoes. And I could close it up at night and I knew they wouldn't freeze. And then during the day, open it up. And then they just grew in there and it was so warm. That's kind of how I used my cold frame. But
Yeah. There's always some snowstorm like close to June or in June that just wipes everybody out.
yeah,
And the one thing about May is everybody gets so excited, so they plant everything and they put it outside, and then it snows, and I'm always too busy, so I always plant about the 10th of June. And I shouldn't say this, but my plants get abused. Megan says, ideally, how big should transplant be when planted outside? I understand you don't want them to be too big, but how small is too small? That's a great question.
boy. Well, I think it depends on the plant. And I'm going to go back to those descriptions, even on the seed packets of when to transplant. So if they've been growing inside, they've germinated, they've grown 4 to 6 weeks, I'm betting most of them are going to be not more than a foot. you know, when I buy my tomatoes from the Gallatin Gardeners Club, they are usually around 8 inches to 12 inches for tomatoes. But like you said, I would follow that seed packet religiously, to know, okay, they've grown on this far, and then they say to transplant them this many days after the last frost, then it's just going to be variable from plant to plant, but I would read that seed packet carefully.
Awesome. I have an email that I can send out right now. And to those who want the PowerPoint, I will also upload this on YouTube on Monday when I get back in. I'm going to put my email address in here. So if you guys want either of them, and oops, and you didn't put your information, your emails in the chat, I'll send this to you. And I will also send Sarah's contact information. So if you guys have any questions for her, you can contact her. And what else am I missing? Sarah, am I missing anything else?
I do not, I don't think so. But if I can't answer questions, if you send them my way, I can tell you, I can send you in the right direction. I'm very good at finding the right people. So just send me questions, but I know Rose is very knowledgeable also. So between the two of us, I'm sure we can get questions answered.
Yes. Well, I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. Thank you so much. And Sarah, thank you so much for doing this. We have another upcoming horticulture webinar coming up too. And per normal, I don't have it pulled up, but it should have been on that list that you got when you signed up. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Sarah, so much, and have a wonderful Easter. I hope we get lots of snow, lots of moisture, and we have big, beautiful gardens and flowers this year.
Nice.
Awesome. Audrey, if you want to email Sarah about the online Master Gardener program, if I have your email, I'll send it to you and we'll go from there. If not, then her email is right there in front of us as well. So thank you guys. I will end the meeting. Have a good night. Oh, nice. That is great. Did you see Maelstrom Air Force Base had 21 people? Oh,
No.
so cool. You guys are awesome.
So
That is so cool.
how many people were there total?
Well, there's 25 plus 21. So
Wow,
46. That's awesome.
great.
So cool. Thank you, Sarah. I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, I just hope there's so many questions. You could spend 2 hours on this and not
Yeah.
cover everything. So,
Yeah, and there's I did this so WebEx, I did this differently because my other webinars I've been doing it through Qualtrics and having them supply their email address to me.
uh-huh,
So what I did this time is I went through WebEx, and WebEx you can sign up for this series,
uh-huh.
but you just get notifications saying, "Hey, we have a couple people here or whatever, it doesn't, I don't know." So I talked to Katie Weaver, and she says that there's a way to pull up those email addresses. So I'm gonna figure that out. So hopefully we can tell you specifically how many people came, but that's awesome. That's 46 people. So
Well, that's great. And I think if you could figure out how, like, if I could have seen the questions, I would have
yes.
answered them as we went. Like, or if someone said, "Hey, can you go back to that slide?" That would have been easy enough to do. So, no,
Yeah, it's just so funky, and I know some parts of web actually I'm pretty good at this stuff, but this is always a little bit different. So,
yeah, I think
but
it was
yeah.
that panel is what it
Yes,
probably was. So,
yeah,
well, you have a good evening, and
I
I'm
will.
off to Helena tomorrow for the symposium.
Yes, that is gonna be so awesome.